of life. It's a reality that terrifies us and motivates us. Now, cutting-edge science embarks on a bold mission to extend human life. Some think the answer lies in biology. Some believe it might be in our brains. And others claim that immortality will mean the end of humanity. Will death remain inevitable? Or can we live forever? Space, time, life itself. The secrets of the cosmos lie through the wormhole. The sands of time run swiftly. A reminder that life is fleeting. Death is a humbling reality. But what if life had no end? In just the past 200 years, the average lifespan has doubled from about 40 to almost 80 years. Breakthroughs in biology and physics could soon bring immortality within our grasp. For better or worse, many of you watching me right now may live to see the day when aging and death itself are relics of the distant past. I remember rummaging through my grandmother's trunk once, happening upon objects that had been stored away for years. Everything was faded, curled, rusted. I couldn't help but wonder, when would the same decay happen to me? Michio Kaku, a theoretical physicist at City College of New York, is fascinated with the big questions in science, like whether the laws of physics require that all living things die.
One of the iron laws of physics is the second law of thermodynamics, which says that everything rusts, everything decays, falls apart. We're all made out of atoms, and these atoms in turn obey the second law of thermodynamics.
Anything and everything in the universe has the tendency to go from order to disorder. And once the damage is done, it's extremely difficult to reverse things and unmix them. It's a process known as entropy.
If I mix coffee, I realize that when I put cream into coffee, I increase entropy, I increase disorder. In fact, to see this milk jump out and reform in this cup is such a preposterous event that you would have to wait longer than the lifetime of the universe to see it happen.
The second law of thermodynamics is an unremitting force. Nothing is immune to the power of entropy, not even the cells in our body.
And that's why we age. In fact, that's why we die.
But it turns out that there is a loophole to the law of entropy. There is a way to restore order from disorder.
Imagine that each one represents an atom. Now, if I apply the second law of thermodynamics, it means that entropy increases, it mixes, chaos reigns. Watch this.
The candy on the tray starts off organized and color-coded. But if the tray begins to vibrate, the second law takes over.
Even though this is entropy in action, I can reverse entropy by adding energy from the outside. But the price is I have to constantly be on the alert, constantly add energy from the outside. I mean, this is hard work.
With energy and concentration, Michio can step in and stop the chaos. But reversing entropy in a tray of vibrating candy is far less complicated than reversing entropy in our bodies. Where would we even begin? Walter Longo is searching for the answer. He is a professor of gerontology at the University of Southern California. He knows that many things live fast and die young, and he believes the road to reversing entropy in the body starts where things get the hottest, in the engine.
In the engine, the gasoline gets oxidized, and that's a combustion process, and this provides energy to the car. But because of the combustion, the engine itself can become damaged, and eventually you have to rebuild the engine.
Every cell in our bodies have tiny engines called mitochondria. Mitochondria are double membrane structures whose job is to provide energy. But when these powerhouses wear down, our body begins to decay and age.
And so you can imagine in the cells instead, you have hundreds of these mitochondria, these little engines, and these hundreds of engines provide the energy locally to every single cell in our body.
But Walter has found a way to reverse this deterioration process and rejuvenate mitochondria in one tiny organism. He has extended the life of baker's yeast, the kind you use to make bread and beer, to 10 weeks. That's 10 times the yeast's normal lifespan of 6 days. It may not sound like a long time, but it's equivalent to 800 human years. The yeast's longevity occurred when two genes, RAS2 and SCH9, were removed from its DNA.
So these pathways that we've identified in yeast, in addition to promoting aging, they also promote DNA damage and the damage of a variety of different systems within the cells.
Walter wondered if this fountain of youth for yeast might apply to more complex life forms. And so he began looking for the equivalent genes in a much larger organism, mice. When he knocked out those two genes, these mice doubled their life expectancy.
This is very encouraging because if you look at the similarities between a mouse and a human, we're over 90% identical in many ways. The mouse lives for 2 years and people live for 100 years. So you can see with just a small modification of the genome, you can go from 2 years to 100 years.
There's no law of physics that prevents us from finding the secret of longevity, the secret perhaps even of immortality. If you take, for example, the genome of millions of old people and the genome of millions of young people, which we will do in the coming years, and subtract, you will then find the genes where aging is concentrated. Already, we've identified over 60 genes involved in the aging process.
Now the question is, how do you reprogram a human that lives 100 years to be now a 2,000 or 3,000 year old person?
Walter's mission to keep our engines running forever has just begun, and he's in it for the long haul. Suppose we do find a way to keep our engines running for hundreds of years or more. We would all be very old for a very long time. But this scientist is digging for ways to keep us not just eternally alive, but eternally young. Take our current lifespan and stretch it 5 or even 10 times longer. The joys of our youth would endure like an endless summer. But imagine suffering decade after decade with fragile bones, failing eyesight, and an ever more feeble mind. If we want to become immortal, we can't just extend life. We need to discover how to keep our bodies eternally youthful. Aubrey de Grey